Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. The guillotine awaits. The guillotine loomed over the courtyard like a grim monument, its iron blade cold and gleaming, ready to sever more than flesh. The Mad Hatter sat strapped into its wooden cradle, limbs bound with leather that rubbed raw against his wrists and ankles. He tilted his head back and laughed. Not the polite, civilized kind of laughter, the kind that one might forgive in an eccentric inventor. No, this was a jagged, uneven, high-pitched cackle that cut through the mist like broken glass. It ricocheted off the walls of the execution yard, startling the guards, who shuffled nervously, unsure if it was wise to look at him at all. The Hatter's eyes darted around the courtyard, but never settled, flitting like manic birds. He noticed the dew glinting on the cobblestones, the way it shimmered, as though mocking his predicament. And he grinned, wide and unhinged. "Ah, the reflective surface of inevitability," he murmured, speaking as much to himself as to the universe. "How kind of you to greet me with such wet perfection, little droplets of doom. You always understood me." His voice swung suddenly, from mock reverence to manic screeching. "And you!" he barked at a guard. "Yes, you, the one with the very confused eyebrows. Do you enjoy watching me dance with death, or is this your first time in the theater of execution?" And the Queen was a looming shadow at the far end of the yard, her cloak flowing in the slight morning breeze. Her expression was carved into an unyielding mask, one designed for royalty and menace, and she raised the guillotine blade with a slow, deliberate gesture. Hatter's grin widened further, stretching his face into something almost feral. "Oh, darling," he squeaked, voice twisting like a coiled spring. "The thing about guillotines is their predictability. Blades fall, heads roll, society claps politely. Boring, isn't it? I've always preferred hats that bite. Hats with a sense of humor. That's me. See, hats that laugh when you least expect it." He tapped his chin lightly, as if the idea had just occurred to him, and the guards shifted uneasily, their discomfort growing with every twitch of his fingers. He rocked slightly in the guillotine's cradle, testing his bindings as if they were toys rather than instruments of death. "Do you hear that?" he whispered suddenly, tilting his head toward the shadowed corners of the yard. "The guillotine hums. Oh yes, it hums. Does it not sing to you? Such a shrill, metallic lullaby. Almost soothing, if one had taste." He laughed again, a jagged, uneven sound that blended fear, amusement, and psychotic delight. His gaze flicked to the crows perched atop the walls, each a silent observer, and he waved at them as if they were friends. "My jury of black feathers, you've arrived just in time. I hope the verdict is amusing today." He scanned the courtyard further, the guards shifting uneasily, the Queen's poised fingers, the dew, the walls, even the birds in the trees. Every detail was both absurd and terrifying, and Hatter's mind danced between them with manic energy. "Ah, the beauty of observation," he exclaimed, snapping his fingers as if conducting an invisible orchestra. "Each detail a note, each motion a symphony of doom, and I, the conductor of calamity, perfectly placed to appreciate it all." Hatter's mind turned suddenly inward, as if speaking to the invisible audience of his own imagination. "This is the moment you've been waiting for," he thought. Or perhaps he said it aloud. It was hard to tell which. "Yes, yes, the climax. Curtain up, my dear Queen, and let us perform the final act together, shall we?" He rocked violently back and forth, chains rattling, his hair a wild halo around his face. He giggled, then barked a laugh, then let out a strangled, breathless squeal, his expressions shifting so quickly they might have seemed two different people inhabiting one skull. And then, just as suddenly, he was calm. Too calm. The shift was chilling. He lay back against the wood, eyes half-lidded, and his lips curled in a subtle, almost serene smile. "You see, my dear nemesis," he whispered, low and silky, "the best part of this little arrangement is not the blade, not the falling, not the panic. It's the anticipation, the delicious, exquisite anticipation. One cannot taste fear too quickly. Let it simmer, let it stew." The guards exchanged glances, unease blooming into outright fear. Hatter caught the glance of one, a young man with a pale, frightened face, and his eyes sparkled with manic intent. "Oh, my sweet little lamb," he crooned, voice full of mock tenderness. "Do not look so worried. The blade is polite. Yes, very polite. It won't strike until it knows we've had our fun. And my, Haven't we been having fun? They began to laugh again, rocking slightly, one booted foot kicking out as if conducting some invisible dance. Perhaps we could play a game, Heads or tails? Actually, I'm feeling generous. Why not both? It's only fair. Life's little ironies are so much more enjoyable when one participates. The Queen's eyes narrowed. She was not amused, though Hatter interpreted it differently.
"Ah, excellent," he squeaked. "A wrinkle of emotion, yes?"
The tiniest crack in that stiff veneer. I do so enjoy cracks, don't you? They let the light in. Or the insects. Depends on your perspective. His gaze flitted to the blade again, shimmering in the dim sunlight.
Ah, yes. There you are, my metallic friend. So shiny, so unyielding, so terribly, terribly final.
But we do adore finality, do we not?
He shifted suddenly, letting out a bark of laughter that echoed like gunfire. He began muttering to himself in rapid, disjointed fragments, phrases that might have been secrets, jokes, or threats. It was impossible to tell. A hat for every head, a blade for every folly. I see it now. Yes, yes, the world is a stage, the stage is a trap, and I am the centerpiece. Applause, or screams, both will do nicely. The Hatter's mania escalated, a storm of gestures, cackles, and whispered threats. The guards flinched, unsure whether to intervene or flee. He leaned forward slightly, head bobbing, eyes wide, voice suddenly sweet and childish. "Oh, don't be frightened. It's only death. Everybody dies eventually. Some with grace, some with style, some with a little of my particular flair." He snapped his fingers again. "And I, my dear blade, I provide flair in abundance." The air grew heavier, thick with anticipation and fog from the nearby river. Hatter inhaled deeply, savoring it like wine. He rocked again, wildly this time, muttering insults at the guards, at the Queen, at the universe itself. "You see," he hissed between giggles, "one must embrace absurdity to survive. Otherwise, one might merely twitch and die. And we can't have that, can we? Not today. Not when the audience waits." He glanced upward, where the morning sun pierced the mist in thin, pale shafts. "Ah, light, you scoundrel! Trying to illuminate the end? Well, I illuminate it first, thank you very much. One must always be ahead of one's executioner, and one must do it with style. Always with style." He tipped an imaginary hat, then barked a laugh that echoed again off the walls. Even as the Queen's hand tensed on the blade, Hatter's gaze never wavered. He was a creature of chaos, a jester in his own twisted theater, dancing on the edge of death. Shall we finally see the curtain fall?" he asked, voice rising and falling like a bell rung in delirium. "I do hope the audience is enjoying themselves. Applause! Or screams! Either will suffice." The crows shifted in the trees, the guards stiffened, and the Hatter's grin grew wider, stretching almost unnaturally across his face. Every twitch, every glance, every sound was theater. For him, the guillotine was not merely an instrument of death. It was the stage, the props, the music, and the punchline. And he, the Mad Hatter, was the star of the darkest, most absurd comedy imaginable. And in that moment, as the blade hovered, cold and patient, Hatter's manic gaze flicked one last time over the courtyard, the Queen, the guards, the crows, and he thought, or said aloud, it hardly mattered. If one is to die, one might as well make it unforgettable. The Shattered Workshop. The Mad Hatter's workshop was less a room than a rebellion against architecture itself. The floor sagged in places, supporting teetering stacks of hats, jars of unidentifiable substances, and clocks that ticked backward for reasons known only to him. The ceiling sagged in gentle arches, heavy with cobwebs that glimmered like silver threads in the dim, flickering candlelight. Every surface, every shelf, every dangling pulley screamed chaos. Yet it all operated with a twisted, delicate logic, one that only the Hatter could navigate without losing a limb, an eye, or his mind entirely. Hatter moved through it like a conductor, through a symphony of disorder, arms flailing, voice oscillating between manic delight and sinister muttering. He picked up a hat, roughly stitched from some strange fabric that seemed to breathe. He tapped it lightly. "Ah, you've grown restless," he said, voice soft, then snapping into manic cackle. Yes, I can see it in your seams, the yearning for chaos, the thirst for absurdity." "Excellent. He tipped the hat to an invisible audience and spun around, narrowly missing a shelf collapse. The room itself seemed alive. Gears clicked at random, teapots hissed and sputtered, and clocks chimed in wrong, cacophonous symphonies. Hatter spoke to them all. "You tricksters, you little betrayers of time! You never know which second
will betray you, do you?" "Oh, but I do. I always do." He leaned into a pile of small, malformed hats, rubbing his hands together like a pianist poised over a particularly difficult concerto.
"And now we shall experiment,
and perhaps terrorize a little while we're at it. Why not?"
A thin, greenish smoke drifted up from one corner of the room, curling and twisting in unnatural shapes.
Hatter sniffed, wrinkled his nose, and laughed, loud and abrupt.
"Ah, perfume of despair, a favorite of mine."
"One spritz. And the patrons of this mortal theater know that insanity has arrived."
He waved a hand dramatically, and the smoke puffed at him like a loyal, choking dog. He moved to his workbench, cluttered with tiny gears, half-assembled hats, and what appeared to be a miniature mechanical bird, its head twitching as if it were alive.
"Ah, little Pygmalion, you will be perfect tonight.
Or chaotic.
Or both. That's the fun, isn't it? Perfection is boring, my dear bird. Chaos is divine." He laughed, sharp and jagged, tossing a wrench into the air and catching it by the handle with a flourish that was more dangerous than impressive. The messenger had arrived hours before, though Hatter barely noticed, absorbed in his own maelstrom of activity. A crumpled envelope lay on a nearby table, addressed in precise, slashing script. A warning from some distant, concerned party, cautioning Hatter about the evil queen's rising influence. He picked it up, torn between irritation and amusement.
"Oh, a warning! How quaint!" he screeched, laughing like a bell struck by lightning. "Do they think a warning will stop me? Silly mortals. Mortals and their little precautions." He tore the envelope open with theatrical flourish, tossing pieces of parchment into the smoke, which twisted into vaguely human forms before dispersing. In that smoke, Hatter imagined an audience, applause rising, but applause that morphed into screams if he wished. He leaned over the workbench and began rummaging through tools, vials, and scraps of fabric. Yes, we must prepare. The queen is clever, but I am cleverer. Though cleverness is a tricky companion. One moment it dances with you, the next it bites." He grinned, teeth glinting, eyes darting around as if expecting betrayal from the shadows themselves. And the shadows did not disappoint. The workshop was a maze of traps and surprises, all of Hatter's own design. One misstep could plunge a person into a vat of sticky, greenish slime, or set off a teapot that hissed noxious steam in the face of the unwary. He himself had almost fallen into the slime once, though he claimed it had been intentional. A test. Yes, a test of agility and nerve. One must always keep one's body limber when dancing with fate. His cackle echoed in the room, as he adjusted the springs on a hat that would, when worn, cause its victim to speak nonsense in perfect sentences. On invention, Hatter considered his crowning achievement that week. He paused at a wall lined with jars, each containing a grotesque curiosity. Insects preserved in amber-like resin, small heads that whispered useless trivia when tilted just so. Teeth that had been meticulously polished until they gleamed with a malevolent charm. "My little friends," he crooned, stroking a jar as though it were a pet, "you will witness everything, remember everything. Don't worry, I'll make it fun. Or terrifying. Or both." He laughed, and the sound ricocheted through the workshop, bouncing off walls, pulleys, and jars alike. Hatter's mania grew as he moved through the workshop, a frenetic blur. One moment he was gently cradling a teapot, murmuring apologies for some imagined offense. The next, he was shouting at a collection of top hats that had begun to wobble ominously on their own. "Stop plotting against me, you ridiculous fabric fiends! I built you! I gave you life! And now you conspire?" He spun around so quickly that a clock fell, shattering into 100 tiny, ticking pieces, each one striking the floor like a tiny drumbeat of chaos. Through all of it, Hatter's mind circled the warning he had received. The queen's influence was growing. Her shadow stretched across cities and towns, and he knew that she would reach for him eventually. That inevitability, however, did not frighten him. It delighted him. Danger was a stage, and he, the psychotic jester, would dance upon it, flipping and pirouetting with gleeful insanity. He cackled, wildly gesturing at his inventions, imagining how they would perform against the queen's guards.
the Loyalists, the city itself. He picked up a half-finished hat, one lined with tiny needles that could fire with mechanical precision.
Ah, a hat for confrontation, or perhaps for comedy.
Depends entirely on who wears it. He paused, cocking his head, considering it thoughtfully.
Comedy and terror, they are so alike, really.
Only the audience distinguishes them. And he whispered with a wicked grin, I shall decide which it is. The day wore on, or perhaps it didn't. Time in the workshop was elastic, distorted, governed by clocks that ran forward and backward simultaneously. Hatter moved through the chaos like a conductor, through a symphony of insanity, touching jars, hats, springs, and teeth, in a ritual that only he understood. He laughed, muttered, argued with the air, and occasionally broke into song-twisted, nonsensical tunes that sounded like music to the sane and nightmares to the cautious. When night fell, it brought no quiet. Shadows twisted unnaturally, creeping along walls and pulleys, forming fleeting shapes that Hatter waved at like old friends. Ah, the long night approaches, he said, tipping a hat that had just shot a small puff of smoke into his face. And with it, the crescendo of calamity. I shall be ready. Oh, I shall be more than ready. He clutched a jar filled with clock hands and laughed, high-pitched and wild, imagining the chaos that would soon ripple outward into the world. And in that workshop, amidst the ticking, hissing, screaming, and whispering, the Mad Hatter planned, plotted, and played. The Queen's shadow was coming, yes, but he would meet it with laughter, with chaos, with a twisted sense of theater that few could understand and fewer could survive. Every hat, every invention, every grotesque curiosity was part of his arsenal, his stage, his carnival. By the time the first rays of sunlight pierced the fog outside, the workshop had become a labyrinth of potential calamities. Hatter sat amid the wreckage of broken clocks, strewn fabrics, and sparking devices, panting, eyes wide, grin wide enough to split his face. Yes, he whispered, chaos is beautiful, madness is divine, and he laughed, a single sharp bark of lunacy, I am the maestro of it all.
A city of shadows.
The city waited for him like a patient
predator. Cobblestones slick with damp, alleys yawning dark and narrow, each one a mouth ready to swallow the unwary. The Mad Hatter moved through it with deliberate chaos, arms swinging, head tilted in erratic angles, eyes darting from shadow to shadow as if greeting unseen conspirators. Every step was a performance, every glance an insult or a joke, though no one but him knew which. The city was decayed, grotesque, and yet, to Hatter, it was alive with theatrical possibility. He passed a ragged band of pickpockets squabbling over a half-rotted loaf of bread. Hatter stopped, grinned wildly, and barked a laugh that ricocheted off the brick walls. The little artisans of theft, how quaint! He leaned close, as if whispering a secret to the hapless rogues. Do you practice your craft for sport, or merely to amuse the universe? Truly, it's hard to tell. They froze, blinking, unsure whether he was mocking them or offering some strange blessing. Hatter tipped an imaginary hat, winked, and spun away, leaving them gaping at his retreating, twitching figure. A clock tower overhead groaned in protest against its own age, pendulums swinging like a slow heartbeat. Hatter paused to listen. Time itself, dear friends, is a poor liar. Ticks and tocks, whispers, and lies. It twirled on the cobblestones, narrowly avoiding a puddle that hissed with something unidentifiable. Ah, puddles, he said, bending down to peer into it. Reflectors of truth, and occasionally, poison. He giggled, spat a tiny bit of saliva into the water, and clapped his hands in mock satisfaction. Shadows moved along the walls, silhouettes of vendors and thieves, their movements jerky with fear or confusion. Hatter addressed them directly, voices spilling in multiple tones, sometimes childlike, sometimes sharp as a scalpel. Ah, my audience!
You are just in time for the grand performance. Do be seated. Or not. Honestly, it matters little, as chaos respects no seating arrangements. He danced a few steps forward, kicking at a loose cobblestone, which skittered down the alley like a tiny, fleeing creature. An alley cat hissed, arching its back at him. Hatter stopped, crouched, and grinned a manic, toothy grin.
You, my furry sentinel, are far too serious. Loosen up. Dance. The night demands it.
He twirled once,
grabbed a loose piece of fabric from a nearby cart, and wrapped it around his head like an improvised turban. The cat hissed again, and Hatter laughed, high-pitched and ragged. "Ah, rebellion! Music to my ears!" A drunken merchant lurched past, muttering curses under his breath. Hatter intercepted him, bouncing on his heels. "Ah, sir! Do tell me, is it the wine speaking, or the city's innate absurdity? Perhaps both. Delightful!" The merchant glared, uncertain whether to strike or flee, and Hatter leaned close, eyes wide, voice suddenly silky, almost soothing. "No harm, no harm. I am merely observing, evaluating the performance." And then, with a sudden bark of laughter, he disappeared around a corner, leaving the man shaking his head in disbelief. The city itself seemed to respond to him. Walls sagged and groaned, cobblestones seemed to shift underfoot, and flickering lanterns cast shadows that moved independently, stretching and contorting like serpents. Hatter spoke to them, laughing wildly. "Ah, you conspiring little architects of doom! Do you imagine I cannot see your mischief? Foolish stones!" He tipped an imaginary hat to a flickering lamppost. "Well, we shall see who laughs last, shall we? And oh, how I intend to laugh, dear lamp." He ducked into a narrow alley lined with shuttered shops and grotesque statues, each one a frozen witness to centuries of misery and vanity. Hatter paused before a particularly twisted carving of a merchant, mouth frozen mid-scream. "Ah, you understand, yes? The horror of existence! The comedy of life!" He cackled, twirling in place, and pressed a finger to the merchant's stone cheek. "You will serve in my theater yet, dear friend. Or perhaps merely inspire the next hat. Either will do." At a corner, a gang of masked thieves had cornered a young boy, snatching coins and threatening blows. Hatter appeared behind them like a phantom, voice sharp, sudden, manic. "And what do we have here? A display of morality, or merely incompetence dressed as villainy?" He snapped his fingers, and the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, tripping one of the thieves into a puddle. The others froze, unsure whether to fight or flee. Hatter twirled, then bowed dramatically. "No need to thank me. Entertainment is its own reward." He wandered further into the city, encountering bizarre markets selling items that might have been alive, or possessed by spirits of bad luck. He haggled with a vendor over a hat that whispered secrets when worn, laughing as the merchant tried to argue price. "Ah, commerce! So rigid, so absurd. One must negotiate with wit or madness. I prefer both, of course." He plucked the hat from its perch and pressed it to his own head, letting it whisper, "Yes, yes, delicious secrets. Let them stew in my mind." At a crumbling fountain, Hatter paused, peering into the stagnant water. Faces reflected back at him. Some human, some monstrous, some clearly figments of his imagination. He whispered to them, voice soft and teasing. "Ah, my old friends, how kind of you to meet me here. Do you bring news? Gossip? Or merely judgment? Excellent. I so adore judgment. It tastes like vinegar with a touch of insanity." He laughed, a short, sharp bark, then tossed a coin into the fountain and watched it ripple in slow, hypnotic patterns. The city's dangers multiplied as he moved. Rogue performers juggling knives, pickpockets lurking in shadows, cages of birds with razor-sharp beaks, and street urchins ready to throw stones at any perceived slight. Hatter greeted each obstacle with unpredictable behavior. Sometimes he bowed, sometimes he shrieked, sometimes he barreled through with reckless abandon. And always, he mocked, cackled, or whispered something darkly humorous about their existence, their failures, or the absurdity of survival. He stopped briefly in front of a theater, its doors hanging crookedly on rusted hinges. He imagined the audience inside, though it was empty, and spoke to them anyway. "Ah, the grand auditorium of misery. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen of imagination. Tonight we shall witness the dance of chaos. I am both conductor and catastrophe." He threw open the doors and danced a brief, manic jig inside, kicking up dust and debris. The empty seats seemed to applaud. Or perhaps hiss, and Hatter laughed, twirling into the shadows again. By the time he exited the alleyways and returned to the main street, dusk had begun to settle. Gas lamps flickered, casting long, grotesque shadows,
Hatter's grin was wide, manic, and completely unhinged. He paused,
tipping an imaginary hat to the night itself.
"Ah, darkness, my oldest companion, you and I shall weave wonders tonight. Or horrors. Or both. It hardly matters which, for those who survive will laugh. And those who do not well, they will inspire hats." Every step he took was unpredictable, every glance a threat or a jest. To the citizens of the City of Shadows, he was a living embodiment of chaos. A man who spoke to inanimate objects, laughed at danger, and wove his psychotic humor into every interaction, and he reveled in it. Each encounter, each narrow escape, each absurd insult thrown at the unsuspecting passers-by added fuel to the fire of his madness. By the time Hatter returned to his hidden workshop on the edge of the city, he was both exhausted and exhilarated. His mind spun with ideas for new hats, inventions, and traps. He cackled to himself as he laid plans for devices that could manipulate shadows, warp perception, or turn an entire alleyway into a stage of terror. The Queen's influence was spreading, yes, but the city had provided him with inspiration, with chaos, with fuel for the inevitable confrontation. As the last light of dusk faded into the creeping darkness, Hatter sat amidst the debris of the city, the echoes of his laughter mingling with the distant cries and murmurs of the urban grotesque. For him, every shadow, every miscreant, every absurd mishap was part of a performance only he could direct, and in his mind, the City of Shadows was not a place of fear.
It was a theater, and he was the star of a macabre, dazzling, and entirely psychotic spectacle. The Queen's deadly masquerade. The Queen's traps were not merely instruments of death. They were performances, twisted shows of cruelty designed to unnerve, confuse, and amuse in equal measure. To her, the Mad Hatter's chaotic genius demanded response, and she delivered with flair. Alleyways warped into mazes, street lamps bent unnaturally to cast confusing shadows.
Cobblestones seemed to shift beneath feet, as if mocking the unwary traveler. Every trap was a puzzle, and every puzzle was deadly serious. Hatter stepped into the first of these devious arenas with a grin that could have split stone. "Ah!" he exclaimed, spinning in place, arms flailing. "A party! How delightfully impolite of you, dear Queen, to host me without invitations. I do adore uninvited guests, especially myself." He twirled around a crooked lamppost, narrowly avoiding a tripwire that snapped back like a serpent. The sound made him laugh, high-pitched, manic, as though the wire itself had whispered a secret joke. The alley ahead seemed innocuous at first, but the moment he stepped forward, the walls undulated, shifting like living tissue. Hatter paused, cocking his head, eyes sparkling with mischief. "Oh, clever walls, do you think you can contain me? Ha! Walls are merely suggestions, and I," he gestured wildly, spinning on one heel, "I am the maestro of suggestions."
He vaulted onto a trash barrel, narrowly missing a floorboard that flipped upward like a guillotine blade. He landed on all fours, teeth bared in a feral grin, and continued forward, delighting in the absurdity of gravity and architecture alike. A swarm of mechanical ravens swooped from the rooftops, wings screeching, beaks snapping. Hatter raised his arms, speaking to them as if they were old friends. "Ah, my feathery conspirators, you've arrived just in time. Shall we dance a little with our dear Queen's plans?" He leapt into the air, narrowly dodging a snapping beak, and landed with a graceless bow. The birds scattered, cawing in alarm, but Hatter's laughter filled the alley, jagged and unrelenting. The next trap was subtler. The cobblestones ahead bore false seams, stepping stones that would collapse under too much weight, dumping the careless into shallow pits filled with sticky, greenish sludge. Hatter approached carefully, or at least he seemed to, skipped across them, mockingly tiptoeing like a dancer in a twisted ballet. "Ah, danger," he whispered to himself, eyes glinting. "So courteous of you to dance with me. Shall we tango?" He leapt the last pit in a perfect, manic arc, landing with a flourish and bowing to the invisible audience. Every turn in the maze revealed new horrors, walls that exhaled choking smoke, statues that lunged with sharpened fingers, fountains that gushed not water but dark, viscous liquid that clung to flesh like despair itself. Hatter engaged them all with glee, shouting to the statues, "Bravo! Encore! Splendid performance!" He kicked at the liquid, sending it splattering in a grotesque fan of black mist, and twirled through the smoke as if it were perfume. His laughter echoed, a high-pitched, jagged rhythm, perfectly attuned to the city's chaos. A squad of Queen's guards emerged, armored and grim, their faces hidden beneath masks of polished steel. Hatter paused, clapping slowly, mockingly.
Ah, the cavalry. Fashionably late, I see. How charming. Let us make this interesting, shall we? He produced a small contraption from inside his coat, a spring-loaded hat that shot pins in random directions. With a flick of his wrist, he sent it spinning, pinpricks ricocheting off metal armor. The guards shouted, advancing cautiously, while Hatter pirouetted, cackling, narrowly dodging blades that flashed like lightning. One guard lunged, sword extended, and Hatter tilted his head, smiling wide enough to be dangerous. Oh, you do enjoy theatrics. Marvelous! He ducked under the swing, only to leap upward and land atop a stack of crates.
I hope the audience is watching. They must. Otherwise, what's the point of chaos?
He kicked a crate at the advancing soldiers, sending it skidding and tripping two of them into a fountain that hissed and bubbled with dark liquid. Hatter applauded the chaos, bowing dramatically, eyes wild and manic.
He pressed forward into
a narrow corridor lined with mirrors. The reflections multiplied him. Dozens, hundreds, each one gesturing, laughing, mocking the Queen's traps.
Ah! A chorus of Hatter!
How absolutely divine! He skipped along, touching each reflection, speaking to them as if they were conspirators in his plan.
Yes! Yes! We will survive this! Or die! Or both!
Either way, it will be memorable, won't it? He twirled into a wall, narrowly avoiding a concealed blade, and laughed louder, his voice jagged, metallic, and utterly unhinged. A sudden sound drew his attention. The Queen herself, standing at the end of the corridor, pale and imperious. Her eyes narrowed in dark amusement. She raised a hand, and the mirrors shimmered, rippling into shapes that moved independently, threatening to crush or slice. Hatter grinned, claws scraping the floor in preparation. Ah, the guest of honor. How perfectly dreadful of you to attend. And here I thought I'd have all the fun myself.
His voice shifted from mockery to a silky, dangerous tone, almost seducing the traps themselves into hesitation. He darted forward, weaving through mirrors, each reflection a potential threat. You see, my dear Queen, he hissed, voice jagged, chaos is mine. You may attempt to control it, to corral it into predictable death, but it does not bend so easily. A mirror erupted, shards flying, and Hatter rolled, grabbing a loose shard and spinning like a dancer through the shattered glass. He used the reflections against the guards, disorienting them with flashes, shadows, and illusions. The corridor ended in a vast hall filled with mechanical horrors, spinning blades, moving platforms, cages of snapping metal teeth, and more. Hatter surveyed it, eyes gleaming with glee. Ah, a playground! Finally, a stage worthy of our talents. Shall we play? He bounded forward, leaping across platforms, narrowly avoiding teeth that snapped shut, spinning and twirling with manic grace.
Laughter filled the hall, a high-pitched symphony of absurdity and menace. The Queen's soldiers pursued him relentlessly, but he treated them like props in his performance, using every trap against them. Crates toppled, gears shifted, and pins flew with mechanical precision. Hatter laughed at their frustration, calling out mock instructions to imaginary stagehands.
Ah, yes!
A little more peril. Excellent. And perhaps a hint of despair? Perfect. Finally, he reached the far end of the hall, where a massive door threatened to close, sealing him into a pit of deadly machinery. Hatter leapt, twisting mid-air, catching the edge of a pulley, and swung onto a hanging platform.
Ah, elegance! He shouted, spinning the pulley like a baton.
I do love a good exit. He landed gracefully on the other side, narrowly avoiding a torrent of spinning blades, his laughter echoing like a chorus of madness. As he paused, catching his breath, he looked back at the chaos he had navigated. Guards disoriented, traps triggered, mechanical horrors scattered, and mirrors shattered. His grin was wide, manic, a reflection of the city's own twisted soul. Chaos, he whispered to himself, voice soft and dangerous, is not merely a weapon. It is art, performance, life itself distilled into spectacle. He tipped an imaginary hat to the Queen, who had retreated to observe, and hissed through clenched teeth.
You may set the stage, my dear, but I will always steal the show." Night had fallen fully now, shadows deep and malevolent. Hatter disappeared into the labyrinthine alleys once more, every step a calculated risk, every movement a performance, every glance a dagger of sarcasm and insanity. The Queen's traps were formidable, yes, but he was more than their match, because his insanity was not a weakness, it was a weapon, and tonight he wielded it like a maestro, orchestrating chaos, comedy, and terror, with a wild, feral grin that promised the audience
and the Queen an unforgettable performance. Allies of misfortunes. The city never slept, but it did snore in fits and starts, and the Mad Hatter reveled in those moments of quiet before the next outburst of chaos. Alleyways narrowed into twisting veins, lined with the grotesque, the curious, and the dangerously clever. Hatter moved through them like a conductor navigating a symphony of madness, every step a note, every twirl a chord. Tonight, his performance would require assistants, collaborators in absurdity, and allies were not difficult to find, provided they were either sufficiently desperate, insane, or morally flexible. He came upon the first of these allies, a scavenger, bent and crooked, dressed in rags, stitched together with discarded thread from 100 forgotten nights. The scavenger's eyes gleamed with cunning, but when Hatter approached, he seemed more curious than afraid.
"Ah, a connoisseur of chaos!"
Hatter exclaimed, leaning close, face twisted in a manic grin. "Do you see the city as I do? Or merely as a place to pick pockets and stew in despair?" He tapped his temple with a crooked finger. "Ah, delightful. I do adore a mind that dances on the edge of ruin."
The scavenger blinked. You're mad," he muttered. "Absolutely. Deliciously." Hatter clapped him on the shoulder, nearly toppling both into a puddle of viscous sludge. "Yes, mad, insane, a trinity of virtues in a world that worships mediocrity. Come, we shall be partners, or antagonists, or both. Ah, who can say? Labels are for fools, not maestros of chaos." The scavenger grinned, accepting the offer without fully understanding, and they moved together deeper into the city's labyrinth. A few blocks away, the sound of a mechanical fiddle screeched into the night. Hatter paused, cocking his head, ears twitching as if he could hear secrets within the screeching notes. A figure emerged, hunched over the instrument, bowing violently across the strings.
Sparks flew from the fiddle, each note striking metal railings and cobblestones. "Ah, music! Finally, a participant in tonight's symphony!" Hatter exclaimed. "I do love improvisation. Come, play for me, and I shall play for you." The fiddler hesitated, but Hatter produced a hat spiked, stitched, and alive with whispering wires, and pressed it to the musician's head. "Wear this. You will see, you will hear, and you will perform as the city itself demands." The musician blinked, and as soon as the hat touched his scalp, his eyes went wide, and his bow moved with unnatural precision, producing notes that cut through the night like knives. Hatter clapped, hopping in manic delight.
"Yes, yes! Perfect chaos! A duet for the deranged!" Together the trio moved through the streets, leaving behind trails of smoke, sparks, and whispered secrets. They encountered odd citizens, each more peculiar than the last. A street preacher whose sermons induced sudden, involuntary laughter, a troupe of dancers whose limbs moved in impossible angles, and a butcher who hummed sinister tunes while cleaning his knives. Hatter greeted each with exaggerated theatricality, recruiting them into his improvised army of absurdity. "Ah, you!"
Hatter pointed at the preacher, voice jagged with excitement.
"Your laughter is exquisite. An instrument, if you will. Join me, and we shall orchestrate a performance for the ages, or the century, or at least until someone dies. It hardly matters which." He clapped his hands, spinning in place, eyes darting like lightning. The preacher nodded slowly, understanding the offer was less invitation and more decree from a lunatic overlord. The dancers were easier, already accustomed to bizarre movements that defied physics and sanity alike. Hatter tossed them hats that made them glide across the cobblestones, leap impossibly high, and twist in ways that should have broken every bone in their bodies. They laughed, loud, hysterical laughter, each step a tribute to chaos and Hatter's psychotic brilliance. Ah, the audience will weep with envy, or terror, or both. The perfect combination, if I say so myself. They approached a butcher's shop, the scent of iron and blood thick in the air. Hatter bowed theatrically. "Ah, Maestro of knives and hams, you shall lend your precision to our endeavor. Fear not, you will be celebrated. Or feared. Or both. My favorite duality. The butcher, smiling in a way that suggested equal parts madness and boredom, nodded, sliding a cleaver into a specially designed spring-loaded holster Hatter had invented. Excellent, Hatter crooned, tipping an imaginary hat. We shall have a festival of disorder, a carnival of absurdity, and all the Queen's soldiers will be invited. Their path eventually led them to the heart of the City of Shadows, where the Queen's influence was strongest. Here, the streets seemed alive, walls twisting, the air thick with anticipation and menace. Hatter's grin widened to a lunatic breadth. "Ah, my dear dark city, you perform admirably tonight. Shall we push your limits? Indeed, we shall." He gestured to his motley crew of misfits, and they spread out like a symphony warming up. The fiddler struck a note, sending vibrations through the air. The dancers spun and twirled, the preacher laughed, and the butcher twirled his knives in a deadly ballet. Hatter moved among them, orchestrating madness, whispering instructions that seemed nonsensical yet produced results of terrifying precision. Left, right, a pirouette here, a slash there, and, oh, marvelous, chaos in motion, music, motion, panic, delight. He ducked under a swinging chain, grabbed a rolling barrel, and sent it careening toward a shadowed intersection where soldiers might be waiting. Targets! Targets! Or perhaps audience members. Details! Details! Inconsequential! He cackled, a sound like jagged glass scraping over iron. They encountered their first of the Queen's direct enforcers. A pair of masked, armored figures moving in perfect unison, carrying weapons that gleamed like the night itself. Hatter paused, tilting his head, eyes narrowing in manic calculation. Ah! The cavalry, arrived precisely when expected. How theatrical! Shall we dance? With a wild spin, he hurled a hat at one, which unfolded into a contraption shooting pins in unpredictable directions. Sparks flew, shadows shifted, and the Queen's soldiers faltered, confused by the barrage of absurd weapons and the chaotic movements of the crew. Hatter's laughter filled the streets, high-pitched and jagged, mingling with screams, shouts, and the cacophony of chaos he had orchestrated. Yes! Yes! Beautiful! Absolutely divine! He leapt from barrel to barrel, narrowly avoiding swinging axes. The stage is set, my friends! The audience will remember this night! Or fear it! Or both! He twirled mid-air, catching a hat spinning toward him, tossing it at the soldiers like a man hurling theatrical daggers. By the end of the night, the crew of misfits had carved a path of chaos through the City of Shadows. Hatter stood at the center, grinning wide, chest heaving with manic exhilaration. He surveyed the aftermath. Overturned carts, flickering fires, mechanical devices strewn across the cobblestones, and citizens either hiding or gaping at the absurd spectacle. Marvelous, he whispered to himself, voice soft yet sharp with dangerous glee. Chaos is art. Madness is divine, and he spread his arms, sweeping in a grand theatrical gesture. We are the maestros. Night deepened, and the Queen's shadow loomed larger, creeping through the alleys and streets as if sensing Hatter's audacious displays. Yet he did not falter. Instead, he laughed, louder and more feral, tilting his head as if addressing the darkness itself. Come, Queen, show me your fury. We shall dance, we shall fight, and above all we shall perform. The world will watch, tremble, and perhaps, if they're lucky, laugh. Hatter's eyes glinted with manic light. This city, this night, this performance. It was only a beginning. Every alley, every shadow, every creaking rooftop had conspired to challenge him, to test him, and he had emerged, unbroken, triumphant, and more insane than ever. He tipped an imaginary hat to the moon, grinning with the twisted delight of a man who knew he was untouchable, at least for now. Shadows in the dark. The streets of the City of Shadows were no longer merely alleys and crooked cobblestones. They had become a labyrinth designed by malice itself. Hatter paused at the mouth of a particularly narrow thoroughfare, the air thick with the scent of smoke, oil, and a hint of something more sinister. Fear. The Queen's traps were no longer whimsical tricks. They were precise, cruel, and deadly. Yet Hatter's grin widened, teeth flashing in the dim glow of flickering gas lamps. Ah, finally! A performance worthy of my talents.
Mechanical constructs emerged from the shadows. Brass spiders with jagged legs, glass-faced automatons with blinking red eyes, and pendulums swinging with clockwork precision, each tipped with razor edges. Hatter paused, tilting his head, eyes glinting with manic delight.
"Oh, I do love it when they try to organize chaos," he said, spinning on his heel.
So neat, so tidy, so deliciously doomed.
He vaulted onto a stray barrel, narrowly dodging a swinging pendulum that clipped the wall with a sound like breaking bones. The ridge. The Queen's enforcers moved with synchronized precision, armored figures glinting under the fractured light, their weapons trained on Hatter's unpredictable path. But he thrived in disorder. With a flick of his wrist, he sent a small hat spinning toward the nearest soldier. It unfolded mid-air into a spring-loaded contraption that shot razor-tipped pins in all directions. The soldier ducked, swore under his breath, and staggered back into a mechanical spider, which skittered off with a shriek of metal. Hatter clapped his hands, twirling in the chaos.
Ah! Collaboration! So heartwarming.
From the rooftops above, a series of traps dropped. Nets of chain links, nets of sticky, tar-like substance, and swinging cages that threatened to crush anything below. Hatter ducked, rolled, and spun like a performer in a death-defying circus. He laughed, a high-pitched, jagged sound echoing through the alleyways. "You see, my dear Queen," he called upward, voice sharp with manic glee, "chaos is my stage, and you, merely the audience." A sudden movement caught his eye. A cluster of Queen's elite assassins, cloaked in black, moving silently, their daggers reflecting the flickering lamplight. Hatter's grin widened further. "Ah, the piece de résistance. Finally, a real challenge." He leapt forward, his coattails flaring like wings, tossing a dozen small mechanical hats into the air. Each exploded with smoke and shards of metal, scattering the assassins in disarray. He twirled mid-air, landing gracefully atop a stack of crates. "Yes! Beautiful!"
Absolute chaos.
He paused for a breath, surveying the scene. Spinning pendulums, crashing cages, disoriented soldiers, and a few unfortunate constructs strewn across the street like toys left in the rain. Hatter's eyes glimmered with dark delight. "Order," he whispered, crouching low, "is a bore. Predictability? A crime. And predictably, it must be destroyed." He dashed forward, weaving through the traps with manic precision, narrowly avoiding falling debris, snapping chains, and a particularly enthusiastic brass spider that lunged for his ankle. A mirror trap materialized in front of him, floor to ceiling, reflecting a dozen versions of Hatter's grinning face. He paused, crouched low, and whispered, "Ah, my doppelgangers. How perfectly unsettling. Shall we confound them together?"
Leapt into the maze of mirrors, each reflection creating confusion for the approaching soldiers. He danced through them, using the mirrors to disorient enemies, redirecting pendulums with flicks of his wrist, and sending razor-tipped constructs flying with manic precision. The Queen appeared at the end of the alley, her pale face framed by shadows, lips curved in a cruel smile. She raised a hand, and the mirrors shimmered, shifting into a lattice of glass and steel, threatening to crush Hatter in impossible angles. He paused, tilting his head, eyes sparkling with insanity.
"Ah, you've learned elegance. But elegance alone cannot contain a maestro of chaos." He spun, diving through a narrow gap between mirrors, landing atop a mechanical spider, and using its momentum to catapult himself into the air. Hatter's allies, his scavenger, the fiddler, the dancers, and even the butcher, joined him in a coordinated assault that was as unpredictable as it was deadly. The fiddler's strings vibrated against metal, creating dissonant sound waves that knocked constructs off balance. The dancers leapt and twisted through swinging cages, narrowly avoiding spinning blades. The scavenger sabotaged traps with impromptu devices crafted from scraps, and the butcher wielded knives with deadly precision, slicing chains and ropes with a flourish. The Queen's enforcers regrouped, trying to corner Hatter in a narrow corridor lined with swinging blades. He paused at the threshold, twirling a hat in his hands. Ah, a bottleneck! How pedestrian. But we shall make it artistic. He tossed the hat, which unfolded into a spiked wheel, rolling into the center of the corridor. The spinning wheel knocked soldiers aside, sending them tumbling into mechanical traps. Hatter danced past, laughing hysterically, voice echoing with delight and menace. Every movement was calculated chaos. Hatter used shadows, reflections, and mechanical contraptions in concert, turning the queen's traps against her. The swinging cages crushed empty barrels. Razor-tipped pendulums cut through ropes, disarming other devices. Hatter's laughter punctuated the symphony of destruction, sharp and jagged, a reminder to all that he thrived on disorder. "Ah! A performance for the ages!" he shouted. "And all I ask is applause. Or screams. Both are equally satisfying." The queen's next scheme was subtler. A poisoned mist seeping from the walls, designed to induce hallucinations and fear. Hatter inhaled deeply, grinning wide. "Ah! The sweet scent of panic! How intoxicating!" He twisted through the haze, tossing small contraptions that exploded into sparks and smoke, confusing the enforcers. "Fear," he whispered, voice soft and jagged, "is merely another prop in my theater of madness." He leapt into a narrow alcove, narrowly avoiding a trapdoor that would have plunged him into a pit of snapping blades. At last he reached the center of the queen's arena, a massive
hall filled with mechanical horrors, pendulums, spikes, and mirrored walls that reflected every angle of the room. Hatter paused, surveying the chaos with manic delight. "Ah! Finally! The piece de résistance! My dear queen, have you outdone yourself? Or merely outlasted your patience?" He danced through the hall, twirling, ducking, leaping, and spinning with impossible precision, his laughter ringing through the metallic chamber. The queen watched from her balcony, eyes narrowed, lips twisted. She could see the ingenuity and madness of her adversary, the way he manipulated the traps against their own design. Hatter glanced upward, tipped an imaginary hat, and whispered,
"Ah, dear queen, I do love a challenge. Shall we escalate?" "Oh yes, we shall escalate." He leapt onto a pendulum, using it to swing across the hall, narrowly avoiding spikes and blades, landing atop a mirrored platform that reflected his grinning face dozens of times. The hall erupted into chaos, mechanical horrors and enforcers scattering under Hatter's orchestrated madness. He cackled, twirling, spinning, and commanding his allies like a conductor of disaster. "Yes! Yes! Beautiful! Absolute chaos!" He vaulted over a spinning blade, landing atop a moving platform, and used his momentum to knock two soldiers into a pit lined with spikes. Every step, every gesture, every laugh was part of a performance, a deadly ballet choreographed entirely by the Mad Hatter. Night fell fully as Hatter paused at the center of the hall, surveying the carnage with manic satisfaction. The queen's traps were formidable, elegant, and deadly, but he had turned them into instruments of his own chaos. He tipped an imaginary hat to the shadows, to the echoes, to the city itself. "Chaos," he whispered, voice low and jagged, "is art. Madness is divine. Hear this, nuttos. And we are the maestros. Face to face with madness." The queen's palace loomed ahead, a grotesque monument to vanity and cruelty, its dark spires piercing the night sky like jagged teeth. The streets leading up to it were littered with the remnants of Hatter's previous chaos. Overturned carts, scattered mechanical parts, and a few unfortunate soldiers nursing bruised egos and broken bones. But Hatter paid them no mind. He was here for the true spectacle, the apex of the evening's performance. He paused at the gates, tilting his head as if listening to the city itself. "Ah, the audience awaits," he whispered, voice soft and dangerous, "and I am ready to perform." With a flourish, he spun through the air, landing atop a crumbling wall, surveying the palace's defenses. Guards patrolled in rigid formation. Mechanical sentinels with glowing eyes scanned the courtyards, and traps of exquisite cruelty. Spiked pits, swinging blades, and poisoned fog demanded cautions. Hatter's grin widened, teeth flashing in the dim moonlight. "Caution? Ha! That is a suggestion, not a mandate." He vaulted down, landing on the polished marble of the outer courtyard. The queen's soldiers moved in perfect unison, attempting to corral him into a kill zone. Hatter laughed, a high-pitched, jagged sound that echoed through the cold stone. "Ah, so serious, so predictable. How quaint!" He darted forward, using every scrap of chaos at his disposal. A spring-loaded hat shot pins toward advancing guards, ricocheting unpredictably. Spiked cages swung from hidden chains, forcing soldiers to scatter. Hatter twirled and leapt, almost dancing across the courtyard, turning the queen's traps against her own enforcers. "Oh, you do love symmetry," he whispered, spinning in place.
"But I prefer improvisation, much more lively."
From the balcony above, the queen observed with narrowed eyes, her pale face framed by a cruel black crown.
"You are clever," she hissed, voice echoing across the courtyard. "But cleverness will not save you."
Hatter paused mid-spin, tipping an imaginary hat, and addressed her directly.
"Ah, my dear queen. So formal, so dramatic. I was hoping for a flourish, and you did not disappoint. Shall we dance?" He leapt atop a low wall, spinning into a somersault that landed him among a cluster of guards. They lunged, swords swinging, but Hatter's movements were a blur, ducking, weaving, spinning. Every strike was deflected by the environment, every attack countered by a clever trick or improvised contraption. His allies, Scavenger, Fiddler, Dancers, and Butcher, joined in, creating a chaotic symphony of destruction. The courtyard became a living theater of insanity, with Hatter as its conductor.
The queen's traps escalated.
Pendulums swung wider, chains clanged and snapped, and poisoned mist crept along the ground, tendrils of green fog seeking lungs to poison. Hatter inhaled the mist deliberately, eyes rolling back in apparent pleasure.
"Ah, the scent of fear!"
he exclaimed, spinning through the fog, flipping over a swinging pendulum, and landing with a flourish. "It's intoxicating, really. Aromatic despair." A squad of elite enforcers emerged from a side corridor, armored and masked, wielding swords and crossbows. Hatter clapped slowly, mockingly. "Ah, the cavalry! I do hope you've brought snacks. Or, at least, enthusiasm." He produced a small mechanical hat from his coat, winding it like a music box. It sprang open, firing darts in random directions. The soldiers ducked and screamed, scattering into traps of the queen's own design. Hatter twirled, spinning atop a barrel, and laughed, high-pitched and manic.
"Bravo! Simply marvelous!"
He darted forward, approaching the palace's central gate, where the queen awaited on a raised platform. The final stretch was lined with mirrors that reflected his image dozens of times. He paused, staring at himself in the fractured glass, and whispered, "Ah, so many of me, now civilized. But I prefer a little chaos." He lunged, spinning through the mirrors, using reflections to confuse approaching guards and redirect swinging blades. Each reflection distorted his movements, turning him into a phantom that the queen's soldiers could not pin down. Hatter's laughter filled the palace grounds, a jagged, manic sound that reverberated against stone and steel.
"Yes! Yes! Beautiful! Absolute chaos!"
He twirled on a ledge, narrowly avoiding a trapdoor that would have dropped him into a pit lined with spikes.
"Ah, elegance! You try, but it bends to madness!"
His voice was a symphony of glee and menace, teasing the queen, taunting her precision with unpredictable brilliance. The queen's own intervention came next, a cascade of glass shards, floating and spinning in mid-air, forming a deadly barrier. Hatter paused, eyes gleaming, and spoke to the shards as if conversing with old friends. "Ah, how sharp, how punctual! Shall we see if your talents can match mine?" He leapt, spinning through the shards, rolling across the floor, and sending shards scattering into soldiers and traps alike. Every movement was chaotic, yet purposeful, a deadly ballet choreographed by a mind on fire. He landed at the base of the queen's platform, tilting his head and addressing her directly.
"Ah, there you are! So pale, so dramatic, so obsessed with me."
"How flattering." He twirled a hat on his finger like a baton. "But I must confess, I do enjoy the performance more when I am alive. And for now, I am indeed very much alive." He leapt into the air, landing atop a moving platform, and using its momentum to kick a guard into a pit of spikes. The queen's enforcers attempted to flank him, but Hatter anticipated every move. He spun, vaulted, and rolled through their ranks, each gesture a manic blend of improvisation and lethal precision.
"Ah! Order! Predictability! How dull!"
he laughed, spinning atop a swinging chain and sending soldiers crashing into walls with a combination of physics and chaos. Allies followed, turning the courtyard into a maelstrom of mayhem. Hatter paused briefly, tilting his head, and whispered into the night, voice low and sharp. "Madness," he said, eyes glinting, "is not merely survival. It is art, performance, theater. And tonight, Tonight we perform for the queen herself." He leapt into a final arc across the courtyard, narrowly avoiding swinging pendulums and spikes, landing at the base of the platform with a flourish. From above, the queen's eyes narrowed. She raised a hand, and the final trap emerged. A massive, mechanical guillotine, gleaming wickedly, poised for the Mad Hatter. Hatter froze for a heartbeat, head tilted, eyes wild and gleaming.
"Ah, the grand finale," he whispered, grinning. "I do love when they save the best for last." He twirled, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet, eyes scanning for opportunity. The courtyard fell silent, except for Hatter's ragged, manic breathing and the faint mechanical hum of traps resetting. Every guard, every trap, every obstacle was part of the queen's design. But she had underestimated the maestro of chaos. Hatter grinned wider, spinning a hat like a baton, and whispered, "Ah, my dear queen, you are about to learn that chaos is contagious, and I am its patient zero." The Gauntlet of Madness. The courtyard had become a theater of horrors, but the real performance was only beginning. Hatter's eyes glinted with manic delight as he gazed at the gates of the queen's inner sanctum. Every corner was patrolled, every archway rigged, and every shadow seemed to quiver with intent. The air reeked of oil, smoke, and fear, an intoxicating perfume that set Hatter's nerves alight. "Ah," he whispered, tilting his head. "Perfume of paranoia, how exquisite!" He stepped forward, boots tapping on the cobblestones, each echo a staccato beat in his symphony of chaos. The first of the queen's ultimate traps awaited. A floor that was not a floor at all, but a mosaic of shifting tiles, each capable of collapsing into spikes, acid pits, or snapping jaws. Hatter paused, head cocked, eyes darting. "Ah, a dance floor! How thrilling! Shall we?" He began to move, not cautiously, but theatrically, spinning, hopping, and twirling in ways that should have been suicidal. Yet he made it across, laughing with a jagged, high-pitched joy that echoed off the walls. Above, mechanical gargoyles stirred to life, claws extended, eyes glowing red. They swooped down, wings flapping with a metallic shriek, aiming to impale or crush him. Hatter caught one mid-air, twisting it like a doll, and hurled it back into a group of guards who had been foolish enough to follow too closely. "Bravo!" he shouted. Such enthusiasm, such predictability. How utterly charming. He landed with a bow, spinning in a circle to face another wave of attackers. The queen's enforcers moved in synchronized precision, blades gleaming under the dim light. Hatter's grin widened, teeth flashing like shards of glass. "Ah, soldiers, you came prepared? How cute." He produced a hat from his coat. This one spiked, mechanized, and deadly. With a flick of his wrist, it unfolded mid-air, firing darts and spring-loaded pins, scattering the approaching guards. He rolled, somersaulted, and flipped atop a moving platform, laughing in a high-pitched, manic crescendo. From the walls emerged the next layer of madness, mirrors that reflected not only his image, but warped, twisting versions of reality itself. Some mirrors showed the past, some glimpsed the future, and some merely projected monstrous distortions. Hatter danced through them, laughing as reflections lunged, whispered, and mocked him. "Ah, so many of me. How polite. Shall we see which one survives?" He twirled, ducked, and leapt, using the mirrors to confuse guards and redirect swinging pendulums. The floor beneath him suddenly shifted, sending him sliding into a narrow corridor lined with swinging blades, each tipped with poisoned, serrated edges. Hatter laughed, spinning on his heel, using the walls as leverage to vault between blades. Ballet, but with more risk. He ducked under a particularly vicious swing, rolling across a mosaic of glass shards that sprayed sparks into the night. I do love when danger tries to flirt with me. So forward, so persistent. His allies were relentless, each a force of chaotic brilliance. The Scavenger disabled traps with improvised devices, the fiddler's dissonant notes caused pendulums to swing off rhythm, and the dancers twisted and vaulted through swinging cages, distracting soldiers and mechanical constructs alike. The butcher sliced ropes and chains with deadly elegance, creating openings for Hatter to exploit. Together, they became a symphony of controlled insanity, a living testament to the power of madness. Suddenly, a mechanical serpent slithered from the walls, its segmented body tipped with spinning blades and venomous needles. Hatter froze, tilting his head,
eyes gleaming with manic amusement. "Ah, a serpent! How cliché! But I do love clichés when they try to bite me."
He danced around it, leaping over coils, spinning, and tossing a small hat that exploded into razor-tipped spikes. The serpent lunged, impaling a soldier instead, and Hatter applauded, spinning mid-air. "Marvelous! Such precision! The audience is delighted!" The queen herself appeared, stepping from a hidden balcony, draped in dark silk that shimmered like oil. "Impressive," she hissed, voice cutting through the night. "But you cannot escape the gauntlet of madness. Not alive." Hatter paused mid-spin, tipping an imaginary hat, and addressed her directly. "Ah, my dear queen. Always dramatic, always elegant. Shall we play?" He lunged forward, twirling atop a swinging chain, using its momentum to vault over a pit of spikes while sending soldiers sprawling. The next obstacle was a chamber of mechanical horrors. Spinning gears, pendulums swinging in unpredictable arcs, and retractable spikes from the floor. Hatter danced through it, each step a calculated improvisation. He leapt, rolled, and twisted, narrowly avoiding death at every turn. "Ah, danger, my oldest friend! You never fail to delight!" He landed atop a moving platform and kicked it into a group of enforcers, sending them tumbling into swinging pendulums. From above, a cloud of mechanical ravens descended, wings beating like blades. Hatter caught one mid-air, twisted it, and flung it back into the swarm, scattering feathers and sparks. "Ah, the crows always arrive late, but never too late for fun." His laughter echoed, high-pitched and jagged, bouncing off walls and ceilings. "Chaos is contagious, and tonight we are patient zero." A sudden trapdoor opened beneath him, revealing a pit lined with jagged spikes. Hatter twisted mid-air, landing atop a rotating platform. "Ah!"
Acrobatics. How very Parisian of me. He twirled, tossing hats and small contraptions into the pit, creating confusion and carnage among the queen's soldiers. Every leap, every spin, every gesture was a performance. A deadly ballet choreographed by insanity itself. The queen's final trick awaited, a massive hall filled with swinging blades, mechanical spiders, and mirrored walls that multiplied Hatter's image endlessly. He paused at the threshold, head cocked, eyes wild with delight. "Ah, the grand stage, the finale, shall we dance?" He dove into the hall, twirling, rolling, and vaulting, using the environment to disorient soldiers and redirect lethal traps. His allies followed, creating a chaotic symphony of destruction, music, and manic laughter. Hatter laughed, a sound jagged and sharp, bouncing off mirrored walls. "Yes! Yes! Beautiful! Absolute chaos!" He spun atop a moving platform, narrowly avoiding spinning blades, and hurled a hat that exploded into spring-loaded spikes, scattering soldiers and mechanical constructs. "Ah, my dear queen, you are theatrical, but I am performance incarnate." Every step through the hall was a calculated risk. Hatter used shadows, reflections, and mechanical contraptions in concert, turning the queen's traps against her own design. Pendulums crashed into walls, mechanical spiders skewered guards, and mirrored illusions caused confusion at every turn. Hatter's laughter rose to a crescendo, wild, manic, and absolutely unhinged. Ah, theatrics, danger, fear, delight, all in perfect harmony. The final stretch approached. The queen's inner sanctum, where the guillotine waited, gleaming wickedly. Hatter paused, surveying the carnage. Bodies strewn across the floor, mechanical horrors shattered, and chaos reigning supreme. His eyes glimmered with manic light. Ah, the grand finale. The stage is set, the audience breathless, I imagine. He tilted his head, speaking to the shadows. "Shall we conclude?" With a running leap, Hatter vaulted over the final pit, spinning mid-air, and landed at the base of the queen's dais. His allies surrounded him, creating a final barrier between him and the queen's remaining enforcers. Hatter grinned wide, teeth flashing in the dim light, voice soft and dangerous. Chaos is not merely survival, it is art. And tonight, we perform for the queen herself. The queen's shadow loomed over him as the mechanical guillotine descended slowly, its gleaming edge catching the pale moonlight. Hatter's grin never faltered. Ha! How predictable. And yet, exhilarating. He twirled, flipping a small hat toward the mechanism. It exploded in sparks, jamming the guillotine and causing a cascade of mechanical failure. Soldiers scrambled, alarms blared, and Hatter laughed, high-pitched, manic, and entirely untouchable in his chaotic brilliance. The gauntlet of madness had been traversed, survived, and turned into a theater of the absurd. Hatter's grin stretched wide, arms outstretched, tilting his head to the sky. "Ah, the Queen! You have tried and failed! Chaos is eternal!" He spun in place, his laughter echoing across the ruined courtyard, a symphony of insanity that would be remembered, or feared, for years to come. The guillotine's embrace! The inner sanctum of the Queen's palace stretched before him, a cathedral of cruelty and precision. Shadows swirled across the marble floors, twisted by the flickering torches set into ornate sconces. Every surface gleamed with lethal intent, polished blades, gears spinning in perfect harmony, and the omnipresent guillotine at the far end, its edge glinting under the pale moonlight filtering through cracked stained glass. Hatter paused at the threshold, head cocked, eyes wide and wild, a grin splitting his face. Finally," he whispered, tilting his hat with a flourish. "The piece de résistance, the grand finale, the final bow, and what a dreadful, delightful audience awaits." He stepped forward cautiously, though caution was a word that never truly applied to him. Every step seemed to dance between chaos and control, a manic ballet that somehow defied physics and sanity. The floor beneath him was treacherous, riddled with retractable spikes and mechanical traps camouflaged as ornate tiles. He twirled and skipped, landing atop one such tile to send a spiked mechanism springing into the air, impaling a pair of approaching enforcers. Hatter's laughter, jagged and high-pitched, echoed like shards of broken glass. From the shadows, a squad of the Queen's elite enforcers emerged, armored in black, and moving with a precision that spoke of deadly training. They spread out in a semicircle, attempting to box him in. Hatter paused, tilting his head, and produced a hat from his coat. A mechanized creation covered in spinning spikes and spring-loaded darts. With a flick of his wrist, it unfolded mid-air, spewing a hail of deadly projectiles. Soldiers dove, stumbled, and collided with each other, chaos spilling from Hatter's fingertips like liquid fires. He bounded across the marble floor, leaping atop a low column to survey the scene. "Ah, so neat, so orderly, how boring!" he exclaimed. "But I do adore a little bedlam." He spun, twirling atop the column before vaulting toward the next wave of enforcers. A swing of a nearby chandelier provided a flying platform, and Hatter used it like a trapeze artist, landing with impossible precision atop a mechanical spider that skittered toward the central hall. He grinned, tilting his head, eyes gleaming with feral glee. The Queen appeared above him, framed by the grand arch of the inner sanctum balcony. She was pale and magnificent, her presence commanding even in the chaos. "You have survived longer than I anticipated," she hissed, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "But your performance ends here. The guillotine awaits, and you will bow or bleed." Hatter's grin widened, teeth flashing in jagged perfection. He twirled a small hat in his hand, flipping it into the air, and catching it with theatrical flair. "Ah, my dear Queen, always so dramatic. But I must confess, I prefer improvisation to execution. Shall we tango?" The floor trembled as the Queen triggered the next wave of traps. The tiles shifted, some collapsing into pits lined with serrated spikes, others erupting with poison gas that hissed like serpents. Hatter laughed, spinning, diving, and vaulting across the treacherous ground. "Ah, danger, delight, perfume of despair!" He flipped backward over a pit, landing atop a moving platform that carried him toward the guillotine, spinning mid-air with manic elegance. Mechanical constructs emerged from the walls, spider-like machines, their legs tipped with spinning blades, their red eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. Hatter met them with a grin, leaping atop the nearest construct, twisting its legs like a puppeteer manipulating a marionette, and sending it crashing into a wall with a metallic shriek. "Ah, cooperation! Such elegance! Such predictability!" His allies, the Scavenger, the Fiddler, the Dancers, and the Butcher, swarmed the remaining enforcers. The Fiddler's strings emitted discordant notes that caused mechanical traps to oscillate wildly. The Dancers vaulted through swinging cages, slicing ropes and chains in impossible arcs. The Scavenger sabotaged traps with a manic inventiveness that seemed inspired by Hatter himself, while the butcher dispatched enforcers with a brutal, bloody precision. The inner sanctum had become a stage of controlled chaos, and Hatter was the maestro. A column of fire erupted from the floor, forcing Hatter to leap backward. He somersaulted over a swing of razor-tipped chains, landing atop a moving platform and using it to vault over another trap.
"Ah, flames, my oldest friends! How passionate of you!" He twirled in midair, catching a dangling chain, swinging, and landing gracefully atop a tile that flipped, sending a serrated spike into a nearby soldier. His laughter rang through the hall, jagged, manic, and entirely untethered. The Queen's final enforcers moved to block his path, a wall of black armor and flashing blades. Hatter paused, tilting his head, voice soft but venomous. "Ah, predictability. How pedestrian. Shall we make it interesting?" He spun atop a trapdoor, sending a spring-loaded hat into the midst of the enforcers. It exploded, ejecting pins and blades, scattering them into pits and traps with delightful chaos. He leapt into the air, flipping over another trapdoor, and landed atop a moving platform aimed directly at the guillotine. The guillotine gleamed at the far end, its edge poised like the blade of inevitability. Hatter approached with theatrical flair, arms spread wide, tilting his head as though savoring the impending danger. "Ah, the grand finale, my dear, dear Queen," he whispered. "So sharp, so punctual. Shall we dance?" The Queen's voice cut through the chaos like a knife.
"You are clever, but cleverness will not save you. Your death will be exquisite." Hatter grinned wider, eyes wild, teeth flashing. He vaulted over a pit, spinning mid-air to kick a soldier into the guillotine mechanism. Sparks flew as the machine jammed slightly, the Queen's edge clattering against the stone floor. Hatter laughed, twirling, flipping, and ducking, a whirlwind of chaotic brilliance. "Ah, my dear, you do love theatrics, but chaos is my specialty." A swarm of mechanical birds descended from the ceiling, wings flapping like blades. Hatter caught one mid-air, twisted it, and flung it back into the swarm, scattering feathers, sparks, and enforcers alike.
"Ah, timing, precision, madness, all in one package."
He flipped backward, landing atop a rotating platform, using its momentum to vault over the guillotine's descending edge. The Queen herself descended the balcony, stepping onto the moving platform with regal menace. "Enough games!" she hissed. "Face me, or die beneath your own chaos." Hatter tilted his head, voice soft and jagged, almost conversational. "Ah, face to face at last! How thrilling! Shall we play? Shall we perform?" He twirled a hat in his hand, letting it spin like a top. "Ah, you've prepared so many delightful traps, and yet you underestimate the power of improvisation."
The guillotine's edge began its slow descent again.
Hatter vaulted onto a nearby tile that flipped beneath his weight, launching a series of spring-loaded hats into the Queen's enforcers. They scattered into traps, twisted, and mutilated by the very mechanisms she had crafted.
Hatter flipped, twirled, and landed at the base of the platform with a flourish. He laughed, high-pitched and jagged, spinning atop a moving gear, his eyes wild and brilliant.
"Ah, Queen! So pale, so dramatic, so exquisite. Shall we conclude this dance?" He lunged forward, spinning through swinging pendulums and razor-edged chains, landing atop a trap that propelled him into the final corridor leading directly beneath the guillotine. The Queen's soldiers were now scattered, defeated, or trapped in their own mechanisms. The inner sanctum had become a chaotic symphony of destruction, and Hatter stood at its center, grinning, arms outstretched.
"Ah, chaos is not merely survival. It is art.
It is theater, and tonight we perform for the Queen herself." The guillotine blade gleamed, descending ever so slightly, catching the reflection of Hatter's grinning face dozens of times in the polished steel and mirrors lining the chamber. He paused, tilting his head, whispering, "Ah, so close, so imminent. Danger has never been so delicious."
He twirled, flipping a small mechanized hat into the mechanism. Sparks flew, the guillotine jammed slightly,
and a few gears shattered. Hatter laughed, a sound jagged, manic, and entirely untethered. Every step, every spin, every gesture had been a performance, a deadly ballet choreographed by a mind on fire.
Hatter grinned, tilting his head to the Queen.
"Ah, my dear, how predictable, and yet exhilarating." He leapt onto the moving platform, leading directly beneath the guillotine, spinning mid-air, ready to face the final moment of the night's symphony. The queen's shadow loomed over him, her pale face twisted in fury. "You will pay for your insolence," she hissed, stepping forward as the guillotine descended toward its inevitable conclusion. Hatter tilted his head, voice soft, dangerous, and utterly manic. "Ah, pay? No, my dear queen, tonight we are even, we dance, we perform, we play." His laughter, jagged and high-pitched, filled the chamber as the guillotine's edge hovered above him. "Ha! The audience is breathless, and so am I!" The edge of madness. The inner sanctum had been transformed into a theater of destruction, and Hatter stood at its center, wild eyes gleaming with manic light. The guillotine's blade hovered above him like the inevitable hand of fate, yet he grinned as though fate itself were a performer to be mocked. The queen loomed on her balcony above, pale and imperious, every inch the predator surveying a cornered prey. But the prey, Hatter, was neither cornered nor tame. "Ah!" he exclaimed, tilting his hat, voice high-pitched and jagged. "The final act! How deliciously dramatic! You've prepared everything, and yet I remain." He spun atop the platform beneath the descending blade, arms flung wide, laughter echoing like shattered glass. "Do you feel it, my dear? The tension, the anticipation, the exquisite terror." Around him, the inner sanctum trembled with the remnants of chaos. Guards and enforcers lay entangled in the queen's own devices. Mechanical constructs shattered, mirrored walls cracked into jagged teeth of reflection, and the lingering hiss of poisoned fog mixed with sparks and flame. Hatter surveyed the carnage with a gleeful eye, as though every deadly mechanism were a stroke in his own masterpiece. The queen's voice cut through the air, slicing the tension. "Enough games! Submit, or this ends!" Hatter laughed, a high-pitched, manic sound that bounced off the walls. "Submit? Ha! You mistake desperation for decorum, my dear. I do not bow, I perform." He tilted his head, spinning in place, eyes darting between moving platforms, swinging chains, and the guillotine's descending edge. Ah, performance, precision, and madness! With a sudden lunge, he vaults onto a swinging chain, flipping mid-air and landing atop a shattered mechanical spider. The construct collapsed beneath him, gears exploding, sparks flying, but Hatter remained standing, arms outstretched in theatrical triumph. "Ah! Predictable traps! How pedestrian! I do hope you've brought something sharper for the finale." From above, the queen triggered the final layer of defenses. A barrage of mechanical scythes swung from walls and ceiling, cutting arcs of death with ruthless accuracy. Hatter's eyes glittered. "Ah, elegance, precision, but chaos!" He dove forward, flipping over one scythe, rolling under another, and landing atop a rotating platform that flung him toward the descending guillotine. "Yes! Chaosy is beautiful!" The platform carried him into a narrow corridor lined with mirrors reflecting dozens of Hatter's faces, each distorted, each laughing, each grinning with madness. He paused for a moment, spinning in place, and whispered to the reflections, "Ah, so many of me. How polite. But only one truly dances." With that, he bounded forward, kicking one reflection into a trap that impaled a remaining soldier. The chaos was total, brilliant, and entirely under his control. Queen's shadow fell across him as she stepped from the balcony, descending via a moving platform of her own. "You are clever, but cleverness will not save you," she hissed. "Your death is inevitable." That had him. Hatter tilted his head, eyes glinting with feral delight. "Ha ha! Inevitability! My old friend, I was beginning to miss you, but—" He paused, spinning a small hat in his hand. "I have other plans." With a somersault, he flipped onto a nearby platform, narrowly avoiding the guillotine's blade. Sparks erupted from the mechanism, jamming it slightly, and Hatter let out a jagged, high-pitched laugh. "Ah, so close, yet so malleable." The queen gestured, and a final wave of mechanical horrors descended, swinging pendulums tipped with blades, retractable spikes, and venomous contraptions designed to tear flesh from bone. Hatter twirled, ducked, and vaulted with impossible precision. "Ah! Ballet of the damned! How exhilarating!" He flipped over a pit, landing atop a rotating gear that carried him closer to the guillotine, spinning mid-air to avoid swinging blades. His allies fought with brutal brilliance. The fiddler's discordant notes caused pendulums to swing off rhythm. The Scavenger sabotaged traps with manic ingenuity, The dancers vaulted through swinging cages and sliced chains, sending soldiers into pits. And the butcher dispatched any remaining enforcers with brutal efficiency. The inner sanctum had become a theater of orchestrated chaos, and Hatter's laughter was its soundtrack. The Queen's eyes narrowed as she raised a hand, attempting to summon the guillotine's full power. Hatter's grin widened. "Ah, escalation, how polite of you!" He produced a mechanized hat, flinging it into the gears. Sparks flew, the guillotine shuddered, and the edge wobbled. Hatter spun, twisting on the ball of his foot, and flipped backward onto a moving platform that carried him directly beneath the descending blade. Time seemed to slow. Hatter's wild eyes met the Queen's pale glare. Ah, the moment. So exquisite. The audience waits with bated breath. Shall we conclude? He twirled, spinning in place as the guillotine descended. Sparks flew. Gears groaned, and mechanical constructs screamed in protest. Hatter leapt, flipping over the descending edge, landing atop a narrow platform, spinning in place, arms wide. Ah! Danger, delight, performance, and madness! He let out a high-pitched, jagged laugh, reverberating off the walls. The Queen's hand trembled as she prepared her final strike. The guillotine's blade paused, teetering on the edge of inevitability. Hatter grinned, tilting his head. Ah, so close, yet so tantalizingly uncertain. He twirled, spinning atop a moving platform, eyes scanning the chamber. Every mechanism, every shadow, every trap was a potential advantage. Chaos was his ally, madness his weapon. The Queen's voice cut through the tension, sharp and deadly. "One step, and you die." Hatter laughed softly, almost conversational. Ah, death, so dramatic. But I enjoy the suspense. He took a step forward, spinning on one foot, and flipped a hat toward the guillotine. Sparks erupted as it struck the mechanism, jamming it further. The blade quivered, teetered, and shuddered, yet did not fall. Around him, the inner sanctum trembled with the echoes of destruction, sparks, smoke, and the remnants of mechanical carnage. Hatter's allies had cleared the remaining enforcers, leaving only him and the Queen. He tilted his head, a manic glint in his eyes. Ah, the stage is ours, the finale imminent. The Queen's platform shifted, moving her closer, her glare frozen on the Mad Hatter. "This ends now," she hissed. "Submit or die." Hatter grinned wider, voice low, dangerous, and utterly unhinged. Ah, submission? A quaint idea. I prefer improvisation. Shall we dance? He flipped onto a moving gear, spinning mid-air, narrowly avoiding the guillotine's blade. Sparks flew, the mechanism groaned, and Hatter landed with a flourish, arms outstretched, eyes wild with manic delight. The Queen's platform advanced further. Hatter lunged, flipping onto a swinging chain, vaulting into the air with impossible precision. Ah! Height! Momentum! Drama! His laughter cut through the chamber, high-pitched, jagged, and utterly untamed. Performance! Precision! Madness! The guillotine shuddered beneath him, its edge glinting, poised to descend, yet jammed just enough to create a sliver of uncertainty. Hatter grinned, tilting his head. Ah! And there it is! The uncertainty. My favorite! He landed atop the platform directly beneath the blade, spinning in place, arms outstretched. His allies cheered silently from the shadows, but Hatter ignored them, his focus absolute, manic, and entirely theatrical. Ah, my dear Queen, shall we end this, or merely pause? His grin widened, teeth flashing like broken glass in the dim light. The Queen's eyes narrowed, calculating, furious, but even she could not predict the next movement of the Mad Hatter. He twirled, flipped, and vaulted with impossible grace, laughter filling the chamber. Ah, the grand finale, the apex, and yet so many possibilities remain. The guillotine quivered, suspended in deadly limbo, its edge reflecting dozens of fractured Hatter faces in the mirrored walls. He paused atop a rotating gear, spinning in place, voice soft but deadly. Ah, what a marvelous cliffhanger! The Queen's hand hovered over the mechanism, a single moment away from decisive action. Hatter grinned wider, tilting his head, eyes gleaming. Ah, the edge! The precipice! And what lies beyond? Who can say? Only chaos knows, and I am its maestro. He laughed, high-pitched and jagged, a sound that would linger in the palace long after the night ended. Sparks flew, gears groaned, the guillotine trembled, and the queen's platform shifted. Hatter's grin never faltered, his eyes wild, teeth flashing in a manic symphony of brilliance. And then, the moment froze. The guillotine's blade hovered, the queen poised, the Mad Hatter grinning, spinning, alive in a perfect balance of madness and suspense. The chamber held its breath, suspended between inevitability and uncertainty, the finale unresolved, a perfect invitation for chaos to continue. Hatter tilted his head, voice soft, dangerous, almost conversational. "Ah, dear queen, ah, audience." And so the performance pauses. His laughter echoed, fading only slightly, leaving a lingering, jagged promise of continuation.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.